Hello students, welcome to the class on Development Administration, in which we will deal with politics of development administration. The objectives of this session are: 1. To understand the changing aspects of development administration. 2. To throw light on the boundary line between politics and administration. 3. To comprehend the relevance of political stability. 4. To focus on the importance of people's participation in the political system. Introduction. The processes and operations of administration have been increasingly bedeviled by the tortuous ways of politicians, particularly those in power. Politicians often try to use public officials to further their own plans and policies, and public officials are at times dependent on politicians for rapid or unusual promotions, though not for the normal ones. The politician and the public official are thus both engaged in the business of government, and their paths cross and at times, unfortunately, even double cross. The boundary line between politics and administration is thus not at all clearly drawn, but should be. The minister must learn to count on the implementation of his policies by a service trained to carry out ministerial orders without political bias, without expectation of political favour. The civil servants must therefore be free of political pressure, political expression and political responsibility. The minister on his part must shoulder the political responsibility and protect his officers who cannot freely speak for themselves against both public and party pressure. A committed civil service. If by this is meant a body of civil servants who are committed to the service of the people and to the tenets and truths enshrined in the Constitution, there would be nothing wrong. But if, on the other hand, a political or ideological commitment is intended, it would spell disaster for the continued efficiency and impartiality of these services. It is incontrovertible that any attempt to inject ideological commitment, which is almost synonymous with indoctrination obtaining in totalitarian states, would not merely be impracticable but undesirable in a multi-party federal democratic setup as in our country. And if any party takes it into its head to undertake the task, it would tend to convert civil service cadres into party cadres, which would in turn force the nation on the road to dictatorship. The widespread and proliferating malaise affecting administration and public life in our country today is a woeful lack of values, norms and standards. The devaluation of values is far more calamitous than the devaluation of currency, and what is urgently needed for reform and revival is a revaluation or transvaluation of values. Standards and norms have to be evolved and prescribed not merely for quality and quantity of work, but also for behavior and conduct. The first duty of officers is to give their undivided allegiance to the state at all times and on all occasions when the state has a claim on their services. They must not subordinate their duty to their private interests, neither should they put themselves in a position where their duty and their private interests conflict, and they must not make use of their official position to further those interests. Though the state is, in general, not concerned in their private activities, they must not be such as might bring discredit to the service. Further, the civil servant must not only be honest, in fact, but also he must not, as far as is humanly possible, lay himself open to suspicion of dishonesty. Let us now turn to the changing aspects in development administration. The administration has to play a more positive and dynamic role in fulfilling hopes and aspirations in response to environmental changes. The changed social and political conditions demand increased attention to matters like maintenance of stability and security, promotion of national integration, and reinforcement of social discipline in the community at large. The accelerated pace of development requires increased diversification and specialization of knowledge and skills and high level of managerial ability for integrative coordination. Political interference in administration. A very important factor which saps the morale of the civil service is the interference of the ministers and other politicians in the work of administration on behalf of their partymen, friends and relations. This political interference takes two forms. In the first place, it leads to tampering with rules and regulations. The interference of the members of the legislatures and office bearers and other workers of the ruling party in the normal working of the administration. Another method of political interference is that of patronage regard to appointments in the state civil services. The question of posting, transfer and promotion of civil servants are not considered on merit, and influence and corruption are allowed to have a full play in the matter, which not only destroys the esprit de corps of the civil service but also demoralizes it. If these matters are considered on the basis of merit, nobody would have any grouse. The doctrine of neutrality of the civil service. The theory of the neutrality of the civil service was developed in Great Britain to meet the requirements of the cabinet system of government, in which the tenure of the political executive is indeterminate and frequent changes in the party character of the government take place. This concept has three implications. 1. Public confidence in the non-political character of the civil service. 2. Confidence of ministers belonging to any political party in the loyalty of their permanent subordinates. 3. High morale of the civil service based on the confidence that promotions would be made not on the basis of political considerations but of merit. It would be admitted on all hands that these are very desirable conditions for the success and efficiency of the administration. In the present times, however, it is maintained by many persons that the theory of neutrality of the civil service has become out of date due to the acceptance of the welfare ideal by all civilized governments, and also due to the process of decision making having become diffused over the entire governmental machinery and not being confined to the political executive. In such circumstances, it is suggested that the civil servant should be filled with a missionary zeal for welfare work. It is further pointed out that in a developing country like India, such a thing is absolutely essential in order that the work of national reconstruction and development might be accelerated. The civil servants owe loyalty to the state and not to any political party which may be in power, as they are concerned with the means of government and not its ends. The relations between the ministers and civil servants are very delicate, but in India, no traditions have so far been developed to put them on a satisfactory and enduring basis. These relations should be examined from various angles and should be based not on partisan considerations but those of the larger interests of the country. Moving on to the aspects of political stability. In the developed countries, political stability is a major requirement. At any cost, they want to keep their country politically stable. With this objective in view, these countries have developed political institutions which provide not only adequate representation to all communities but have set strong traditions. The possibility of discrimination is very remote. Political parties play an important role in the national integration of the country. the governments come and go without any hue and cry. The true democratic norms are commitment to development amongst the political elite. Among the political elite of the developing countries, there is a lack of commitment. They are interested in achieving their personal goals rather than looking at the aspirations of the people. Their main aim is to retain power by all means. If such a situation prevails in the developing world, commitment to development among the political elite is a remote possibility. An interesting feature is that bad elements which have been discarded by the society are trying to enter politics for selfish ends. The situation in the developed world is altogether different. Among the political elite, there is a widely shared commitment to development. The commitment in the developed countries often takes on ideological trappings. Common goals are to increase agricultural or industrial production, living standards, improved programs for public health, education and individual pensions, changes in the traditional roles of women or the lower castes, and change of one's loyalties from a tribe to the newly conceived nation. It does not mean that the developing countries are not willingly eyeing these goals. However, the goals are never achieved due to lack of commitment on the part of the political elite. Their first priority is to retain power. Some of the sincere leaders are willing to introduce drastic changes and are committed to nation building, but their actions are thwarted by those who are interested in their personal goals. But a few sincere leaders are eliminated physically or politically by foul means. Modernizing and the traditional elite. In developing countries, a lot of gap exists between modernizing and the traditional elite. The modernizing elite tend to be urban, oriented towards the West, well educated and committed to political, social and economic change. On the other side, the traditional elite tend to be oriented towards the rural world and the local customs. They are bent towards the indigenous religion and at the same time opposed to change. They consider this change a threat to the values. The new elite may control the technological skills that are vital to the nation's development, but the older elite may retain the intense loyalties of the people in the countryside and the urban slums. In fact, these two contrasting models of the elite in the developing countries generate internal conflicts. Under these circumstances and conflicts, the energies for modernization and change cannot be channelized in the true sense. The legitimacy of political power. The political system in developing countries is not always legitimate. In a number of countries, power is acquired through illegitimate means. The political systems in the developing countries can be divided into A. The traditional autocratic systems, B. Autocratic elite systems, C. Polyarchal competitive systems, D. Dominant party semi-competitive systems, E. Dominant party mobilization systems, and F. Communist systems. In the traditional autocratic systems, the political elite owe their power position to a long established social system, which usually emphasizes inherited monarchy or aristocratic social status. Some of the examples of this system are Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Libya, Morocco and Iran. In some of the countries like Iran, major changes have taken place. However, in autocratic elite systems, military professionals and sometimes civilians are the rulers. For example, South Korea, Thailand, Burma, Indonesia and Iraq. In polyarchal competitive systems, states like Philippines, Chile, Israel, Argentina, Brazil, Turkey and Nigeria have political systems that conform most closely to the models of Western Europe and the United States of America. However, In dominant party semi-competitive systems, there is a dominant political party which holds the monopoly of actual political power, but other parties are legal, though they do not have much control. Political power in this sense is not legitimate. Similarly, in communist systems, the commitment is to the Marxist and Leninist ideology. Examples are North Korea, Vietnam, and Cuba. In dominant party mobilization systems, the dominant party is usually the only legal party. Other parties, if permitted, are surrounded by restrictive controls. Examples are Algeria, Bolivia, Egypt, Ghana, and Mali. According to Hedy, in all these systems, political power is not as legitimate as it is in the democratic systems of Western Europe and North America, which are the most developed countries of the world. To be more specific, political power in the developed world tends to be more legitimate and acceptable to the masses. The range of political activity. The volume and range of political activity in various developing countries is less because of the absence of political consciousness amongst the masses. Whatever institutions exist are dormant. Since power is not legitimate in these countries, political activity too is in a restricted form. On the other side, such a situation does not prevail in the developed world. In fact, these societies tend to have a welfare state. The welfare state arose to deal with the problems of industrialization, urbanization, and rising populations, which were a part of the process of development. Modern industry polluted the atmosphere and resulted in bad living conditions for the workers. The magnitude of problems increased so rapidly that it got beyond the control of the individuals and voluntary agencies. Hence, the state was more and more dependent on protecting the helpless citizens. Thereby, there was a tremendous increase in legislative activity. This process naturally resulted in an extension of the functions of the political administrative systems. Let us now focus in the participation of the people in the political system. In developing countries, the interest and involvement of the people in the political system is not encouraging. Most of the people do not understand the importance of political activity because of illiteracy. However, in some countries like India, people do involve themselves and take interest in the political system of their country. But this participation is negligible in comparison with the developed world. In fact, in developed societies, people take a lot of interest and are usefully involved in the political system, although this does not necessarily mean active participation by the citizenry in the political decision making. People in these countries are organized politically and have strong pressure groups and play an important role in forming the policy of the government. The political party in power in developed countries cannot ignore the viewpoint of the pressure groups in formulating the policy. The rationality in political decisions. Developing societies are characterized by a strengthening tendency of the traditional elite. However, in the developed countries, there is a weakening tendency of the traditional elite. Under these circumstances, where traditional elite continue to have a lot of power and influence, it is difficult to make decisions on the basis of reason and also on secular lines. Political decisions are taken after passing all the norms of justice and reasoning in favor of one particular community or another. For instance, it is difficult to enforce monogamy among the Muslims by law in India today because of political reasons. Similarly, the caste system still prevails among the Hindus, and many high caste Hindus continue to practice untouchability in parts of rural India. Even elections are fought on religious or caste basis. All these conditions clearly indicate that political decisions in the developing countries can never be on rational and secular basis unless some drastic changes take place and good sense prevails amongst the people in these countries. All these countries will have to be pragmatic in their approach if they intend to cope with the developed world. Political features and development. There is an imbalance in the development of various political features. The former colonies within the developing world still try to retain some features of the legislative, executive and administrative forms of the former colonist power, resulting in a wide gulf between the formal procedures and actual practices. Because the legislatures and the executive departments are not sufficiently manned by experienced men, the combination of weak legislatures and inefficacious chief executive plus an ambitious military elite have led occasionally to coup or takeovers by the army. Such a state of political uncertainty is a serious impediment to development in the developing countries. However, such a situation does not exist in developed countries. These countries have created their own systems of government in accordance with the wishes and requirements of the people. No such imbalance exists in these countries. If at all some tendencies crop up, the same are set right through democratic methods and procedures without ignoring the wishes of the masses. The possibility of coups or military takeover is remote. An index of an effective organization is the delegation of authority with responsibility at all levels. A failure to recognize the soundness of this principle has proved to be a serious obstacle to the adoption of improved methods and techniques in the third world. Initiation and creativeness are discouraged when the responsible official lacks authority for independent action. Centralization of authority in the hands of the few may give an appearance of efficiency, but is really wasteful of human resources. The factors responsible for concentration of authority are 1. Eagerness for status and prestige, 2. Fear of one's job and position, 3. Belief that no one else can do the job, 4. Belief that people at lower level do not possess a capacity for independent action, and 5. The tradition of centralized authority. A disturbing problem slowing down developmental efforts in most of the third world countries is lack of popular participation in the planning and implementation of programs of local importance. This lacuna has been observed in the evaluation studies carried out, but the public administration in the countries has not yet succeeded in designing an effective structure going right up to the grassroots level to enlist popular participation. While the administrative machinery has been expanding over the years in response to newer calls made on it, civil service integrity, which must necessarily be very high in view of the gravity of the task, is rather low. Many countries in the third world had fought the colonial rule and to this end mobilized the masses to the struggle for national independence. A high level of morality characterized their actions, and when independence was won, the political power was transferred into the hands of such ethically motivated leadership. Under changes unleashed by independence and development, the ethical norms of the national movement ceased to motivate the emerging leadership. Corruption began to creep into the government and has over the years become deep-seated and wide-ranging. The contemporary corruption even engulfs the senior bureaucracy and is politico-administrative in nature. Anti-corruption devices have been announced, but corruption is flourishing almost unabated in the absence of top-level political and bureaucratic commitment. Political interface with public administration is assuming dangerous proportions. To punish politicalization, countries like Pakistan announced purges of civil servants with the changes of government, but such premature retirements were not always distinguishable from witch hunting and produced demoralizing effect on the public functionaries. Conclusion. Students, we can now conclude that decision-making processes and business methods are dilatory and thus exasperating to the citizens affected by them. Field administration, which is a theatre of action, is a neglected sector, and its strengthening is an urgent requirement in all the third world countries. Communication is weak, especially bottom-up, resulting in non-achievement of results. Evaluation and monitoring of developmental plans need greater measure of attention. Thank you.